This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. We have, I guess at the time this is going to go live, it's about to be NFL draft weekend. We have less than a week until the NFL draft kicks off. And a guy we had in, I guess, before last season when we were uncertain if the Big Ten was even going to be playing football, but now we bring them back. The Big Ten had their season. Ohio State guys got a chance to go out on the field, get evaluated by NFL scouts and folks just like him. We have Dane Brugler, lead NFL draft expert for The Athletic. Dane, thanks for joining the show and giving us some of your time in your very, very busy season.
No, of course, Alex. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited for the draft to be here. We're close, so let's get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you start the process all over for next year's cycle. So
starting right now, that's right.
Hopefully a little vacation after the draft, but you do some great work. So wanted to talk a little bit about the Ohio State. Not all of them, because there's a lot of guys who could get drafted, but some of the bigger names that we expect to maybe hear their names called on draft day, or draft days 1, 2, and 3, as the current structure calls for it. And let's start with someone who I would call not the most controversial prospect, but there's a lot of controversial opinions on him. Quarterback Justin Fields. We are hearing from a lot of our sources that the 49ers are going to select him with the 3rd overall pick. And then of course, Vegas odds change from Mac Jones to Justin Fields very quickly as the favorite. But there have been some reports of late that Justin Fields is not going to be the pick, and it's going to be Mac Jones by the San Francisco 49ers at number 3. So what are you hearing on Justin Fields right now?
I can tell you exactly what I'm hearing. And that's what nobody knows. Kyle Shanahan knows. That's who knows. That's it. And anybody that says different, they're lying. And that's the draft. We feel good about the first 2 picks. We know Trevor Lawrence is going to be 1 to the Jaguars, and we feel pretty good that Zach Wilson will be the pick at number 2 to the Jets. And it starts at number 3. That's where the draft starts. And what direction does Kyle Shanahan go? I think, they made that trade up to number 3 with a guy in mind. And then go into each pro day, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Did that move the needle at all in terms of changing his mind? Did it reinforce what he thought going in? These are the things we just don't know. And I mean, there are people on that 49ers staff who have no clue and are waiting to find out who their quarterback is going to be. I would not be shocked at all if when Roger Goodell steps to the podium and he says any of those 3 names. Would not be surprised at all. There's a lot to like about all 3 of them, that you could see a path to success, especially in Kyle Shanahan's scheme. A guy like Justin Fields that, he's a well-strapped together kid, 6'3", almost 230 pounds, 4'4" athlete. He's accurate down the field. One of the reasons why, me personally, why I have, like Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson ahead of him, he's just a little methodical in his process. I think he needs to speed things up, be a little more urgent. And I think he can get there. He's a bright player. He has all the athleticism you want where he can do it. It's just a little bit of a projection there. But this is a top 10 player. And it's not like, Fields should be falling. He's not. He's a top 10 player and he's going to go high. It just might not be, the first or second quarterback off the board. So it'll be interesting, at number 3, which direction the 49ers go. And let's just, for hypothetical sake, say Mac Jones is the pick at 3. What do the Falcons do it for? Is Justin Fields the long-term succession plan to Matt Ryan? Or do the Falcons get out of that pick and take a boatload of picks for a quarterback desperate team looking to get up to that number 4 pick? And then which quarterback do they take, Trey Lance or Justin Fields? So, Justin Fields could be the 3rd quarterback drafted, could be the 5th quarterback drafted. And I don't necessarily think that there's a right or wrong there because, it's just quarterback, it's beauty is in the eye of the beholder with these quarterbacks. And you could point to different things with each one of these quarterbacks and justify why they'd be the 3rd or 5th quarterback drafted. So it's going to be really fascinating to see it play out. I've been told Carolina at 8, even though they did, pull that trade for Sam Darnold, not to rule out the Panthers at 8, just throwing multiple darts at the quarterback board. You have to look at the Patriots sitting there at 15. At what point does it get, just too much of an enticing opportunity to trade up for one of these guys? So the quarterback conversation is just fascinating, and Justin Fields is right in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I think another team is Denver, sitting there. What are they at 9?
Yep.
They're going to be probably in the quarterback market as well, I would imagine. And so, it's interesting to me because is the rumors and all this stuff coming out about Justin Fields kind of like smoke from some teams throwing it out there to try to make it a more favorable, make him fall a little bit to them, things along those lines, or are they real concerns? I mean, it seems like you don't really, look, there's concerns. It seems about Trevor, other than Trevor Lawrence, there's concerns about every prospect. The Jets, who I'm a fan of, don't seem to have many concerns about Zach Wilson. I would maybe argue that, the competition he plays and things like that could be, but, Josh Allen has proved that doesn't necessarily matter so much. But, I think there's definitely concerns over Trey Lance, over Mac Jones, over Justin Fields. So let's not say there's no concerns over anyone, but do you think that all the smoke about Justin Fields dropping is legitimate concerns, or is it kind of, again, just smoke being blown by various general managers and sources to throw people off the scent, or, potentially have Fields drop a little bit? Is it a little bit of a mix of both?
I just think it's a case of all these quarterbacks are really good. They're ice cream flavors. They're all good. It's just, you have different preferences of what you're looking for, what you like, what fits your scheme. And so I just think it's different from team to team and exactly what they want in their quarterback. But I really don't know that Justin Fields is quote unquote dropping. Is he dropping compared to mock drafts that had him at number 2 back in September? Yeah, in that respect, he's dropping. But for NFL teams, I don't know that he's dropping. He's kind of, this is who he's always been for those teams and for those evaluators. So he's a really talented player who he's in a really locked in, loaded class of quarterbacks. We've never seen 5 quarterbacks go in the top 10. Good chance that happens this year. So this is just a rare group of quarterbacks. So even if Justin Fields is the 5th quarterback drafted, I'm not going to look at that and say, oh, wow, they're disrespecting him and he dropped. And it's a really good class of quarterbacks. And, for a team to have a preference over one of these guys over him, that's just how it plays out. And we've seen in the past how that could maybe work out to his benefit. Josh Allen was the 3rd quarterback drafted in his draft, goes to the Bills, and it's a great situation for him. And you look at, as opposed to Sam Darnold, who went ahead of him and he, busted as part of the Jets. So, it could work out in his benefit for Fields that maybe he goes to an organization that's, say the Patriots do trade up for him. Say Justin Fields falls to pick 7, the Patriots trade up there and get him. I'd say that works out better for Justin Fields than maybe going 2 to the Jets. You could make that argument at least. So, it's a really fascinating, top of, first 7 to 8 picks this year, and just how these quarterbacks are going to shape, how those picks happen.
Yeah. Look, to me, I think if he goes 3 to San Francisco, that's a great spot.
Any of those quarterbacks that goes 3. It's going to
for
be
anyone who has
right. Right.
Yeah, that's a great spot. And I think for him, though, specifically, he's from Atlanta. I think he's a guy who could benefit from a year learning behind a guy like Matt Ryan.
Right.
I could see them trading out just because I feel like they probably have a lot of needs, and they can definitely get a lot of value, especially when you're sitting there saying, hey, look, Justin Fields is available, or whoever, Trey Lance or Mac Jones, whoever is available. And maybe Denver or New England gives a little bit more than what they normally would to absolutely make sure that they get one of the guys that they like. So, but I think Atlanta would be a great spot for him. So it will be interesting to see. I think that's going to be maybe one of the bigger storylines of at least, that first night is who goes after the Jets pick. Is it, one of the 3 quarterbacks? Is it Sewell? Is it, someone else? Kyle Pitts could go. Who really, not to San Francisco, but to Atlanta. Who
Right.
really knows? It's going to be interesting. So, that's definitely something Ohio State fans will be keeping an eye on. And how about the running back, Trey Sermon? Didn't start last year off great, but kind of got in his groove midway through the season and finished really strong. Wish he got to play out that Alabama game. I think he would have had another strong game for Ohio State, but played really, really well down the stretch. And I think went from a guy who was maybe a fringe draft pick to, I think he'll I mean, maybe you'll disagree with me. I think he'll definitely be drafted, mid to early, late-ish rounds. But what are you hearing on Trey Sermon?
Yeah, it's really a roller coaster for him because I think based off his junior film, you thought, okay, this guy, a possible mid-round pick. And then the first 4 games at Ohio State, you're like, it just doesn't look like the same guy. Like, I don't know what we're doing with Trey Sermon. And then he was the MVP of the Ohio State offense down the stretch with how he performed, especially that Big Ten championship game. And then what he did against Clemson, it was phenomenal. And so he went right back and put himself into that mid-round conversation. He put himself as a possibility to get into the top 100. This is a running back class where, we know the top guys, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, North Carolina. Those will be the first 3 running backs drafted in whatever order. And then after those first 3, that's where it becomes, okay, what type of running back are you looking for? Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis, he's in that mix. Michael Carter, North Carolina, and Trey Sermon. He offers something a little bit different than those 2 other guys. So just a really interesting player with just how things played out for him. When you factor in, he had the offseason knee issue. He learning a new playbook, a new offense. Like you kind of should expect a little bit of a adjustment period. And so, but once he settled in, man, was he fun to watch. So a lot to like about him. I think really good screen player, really good body balance. There's a lot of what he does that I think translates to the pro game. So there'll be a lot of teams that are interested in him, somewhere likely in that 3rd, 4th round range.
Very good. And then moving to the offensive line, a couple of the guys that cleared the way for Trey to have those big games down the stretch. Let's start with Wyatt Davis, offensive guard, who I'm thinking at this point looks like a 2nd round pick, but I guess you never know. Maybe he slides into late 1st. What are you hearing there?
I think he's going to probably somewhere day 2. I wouldn't be surprised if he went early 2nd. I think he could be there early 3rd. I think it's possible just because it's a really deep group of interior offensive linemen. But he's going to go somewhere in that mix, 6'3.5", 315 pounds. The injury stuff, obviously that affected him this past year, affected his junior film. And so you have to take that into account. That's, the context of scouting. I was told that he got 2 thumbs up because the way that the whole dynamic worked of the process when it comes to the medicals, no combine this year, obviously. So about 150 players had to go to Indianapolis to get some more hands-on medical work done. And all reports from that, from how that went was, 2 thumbs up, went pretty well. So, that left knee injury that he had, I think initially against Michigan State, and then he re-injured in the national title game against Alabama. Seems like that's not going to be a worry and something that, teams are feeling good about. So Wyatt Davis, there are times where he will give up his shoulder and, he gets his body turned and, just needs to shore up a few areas. But there's a lot to like about the way he plays, quickness, powerful. He sees things pretty quickly. He's not just a physical talent. You could the way he sees the field and is able to pick up rushers, things like that. So yeah, Wyatt Davis is a guy that's going to be in demand once we get on the day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, and I think that the thing with him, I don't care if he gets picked late 1st, early 2nd, mid 2nd, early 3rd, even. I just think he's a guy who he could start right away and he could play 10 plus years in the league and just be rock. He's a safe pick to me. I think he's just a rock solid guy. He's really smart. He works hard. He moves well for a guy his size. And I think his floor is pretty high. He may not have the highest ceiling in the world, but I think the player he is pretty good. So that's where I see Wyatt. But a guy who I'm not as sure about, I thought he had a really good season in 2019. Thought he took a little bit of a step back last year, is Josh Myers. What kind of player do you see Josh Myers becoming, and where do you see him going next weekend?
I think the fact that he offers center guard versatility is something that's going to help him. 6'5.25", 310 pounds. The turf toe injury has really been a bummer for him. Wasn't able to work out at the Senior Bowl. He was supposed to be there. Wasn't able to be at the pro day and work out there. So that's something that does cloud his draft projection a little bit. just that turf toe injury. I think he's a guy that, he passes the eye test. He looks the part, strong upper body. His style of player, just that type of player, NFL teams are always looking for guys like that. Highly physical, can create movement in the run game. A guy that's smart. So there's a lot of things that I think projects well. But some of the inconsistencies, kind of like how you were alluding to, that it is something that you worry about a little bit. The durability is something that needs to check out. But once we get, another day two player, third round seems, the right landing spot for Josh Myers.
Yeah, I think if he slides down a little bit, he could be a nice value for someone down the line. You mentioned the versatility, and he's really athletic for a guy his size as well. A lot of people thought he might be a tackle coming out of high school, so. To have the length, the height, and the ability, the strength to move people from the inside, I think could be valuable for some teams. So I'm not going to hold my breath that he goes too early, but I think mid-round value could be really good for someone there. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where this next guy, he may be the best person you'll ever meet as a player. He's really interesting because I thought he had a really, really productive year last year. After maybe not living up to some of the 5-star hype he had coming out of high school. But, I think Jonathan Cooper is a guy who had a really strong year coming back last year. But I still don't know exactly how he projects to the pros. I think he's a little bit small for a defensive end. He's never really played linebacker. So I know 3-4 linebackers on the edge, they do tend to rush and be very similar to a defensive end. To me, it's just body type. It almost seems like he fits a little bit better there. But what do you think about Jonathan Cooper, and what's your analysis on where he may go in the draft?
He's going to be more of a mid to late round pick, because a lot of the concerns you mentioned, he's 6'2.5", 253 pounds, a little undersized for an edge rusher. I don't know that he necessarily has the athleticism to stand up and play in reverse as a linebacker. He was, I think you're right. He played his best football as a senior, but this is still a guy that, in 45 career games has only 10 sacks. He wasn't necessarily that consistent sack artist, the super productive guy. He is a hard charging rusher where when he's able to surprise blockers, he can create and make things happen. But when blockers get the upper hand, he has a tough time countering and reacting to that. So I just don't know that he's ever going to have those secondary moves that you need at the NFL level to be a consistent pass rush threat. When he's able to get that upper hand early and get out of the gate and surprise blockers, that's where, he can bring the juice. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot, NFL blockers, they know what's coming. And so they're able to get that upper hand. And that's where I think Cooper is just going to have a tough time reacting and then just resetting himself and making plays. So love the relentless play style, love the energy, but the lack of counter moves, the lack of secondary moves, I think that's going to work against him. But like you mentioned, I think just being a two-time team captain and being that energetic player, he's going to make it tough for a team to cut him once he gets into camp. So that's something that'll always help a guy like that.
Yeah, and he's going to be a willing special teams guy too, for sure. So that always helps too. Next guy we're going to talk about, I thought, it was kind of 50-50 whether he was going to go or not. And I don't know if coming back would have helped him out at all. So I think he probably made the right decision. And I know the NFL doesn't put a premium on guys like him because of just the way the game is played. I thought he had a good year as actually getting to the quarterback, but in the NFL, I think he'll have a little bit of a tougher time. But just a hard-nosed guy who's going to anchor down, a big-bodied, strong, really tough guy who could take on multiple blockers is Tommy Togiai on the inside. Had a really strong year for Ohio State. Where do you think Tommy nets out in the draft?
Yeah, I think you set it up well because his strengths as a player, you don't necessarily usually draft those types of guys in the first, 2.5 rounds because, his strength is as a run defender. And he's a good athlete. At 296 pounds, he ran under a 5-second 40-yard dash. His jumps were solid, 32-inch vert, 7.21 in the 3-cone. And so I think the hope with Tommy Togiai is you draft him knowing he's going to be a rock in the run game, with hopes that he's going to be able to develop a little bit more as a pass rusher. And that's kind of the hope when you draft a Togiai, because he has a lot of the ingredients. It just, you haven't necessarily seen it on a consistent basis. So if Tommy Togiai can develop those pass rush instincts and pass rush moves, then okay, we've got a guy that is going to be a solid starter for a long time. And he still might be a solid starter, but he's going to be more of a rotational player who's, in and out of the lineup, playing mostly on rundowns and occupying blocks, that type of thing. But where he ends up on draft weekend is really interesting, because some teams are, a little more optimistic about him and what he can be if he develops his pass rush moves. And so, I think the third round is possible. But, a lot of other teams see him as more of just that short-armed, run-stuffing type of run plugger. And that's okay, because, the NFL needs those guys. But for those teams, he's looked at as more of a day 3 pick. So opinions are a little split on Togiai and where he's eventually going to end up, but probably somewhere in that 3rd, 4th round range. And he's just going to be a quality player from day 1.
Yeah, I'm hoping that a better team ends up taking him, that they have less needs that they need to fill. And maybe, in the 4th round say, hey, we can really use a guy like this to go along with all of our great pass rushers or interior pass rushers or things like that. So I think that'd be a great, I think, as you said, he could come in and contribute to a team ready to win right away. So next guy I personally like a lot better than I think maybe some of the projections are. I would be perfectly fine with my team taking Pete Werner in the 3rd round, especially in the way today's game's played. How do you view Pete ahead of the draft?
Yeah, you're definitely not alone. There are some teams that have 3rd round grades on Pete Werner. A guy that he checks a lot of boxes. I don't know that he necessarily has a glaring weakness to his game. And at the same time, I don't know that he necessarily has, that trump card where he does this better than anybody else. When Pete Werner's drafted, I don't know that he's going to go to the linebacker room and he's going to be able to do one thing better than anybody else in that room. But that's okay, because when you do everything pretty well, there's a place for you in the NFL. 6'3", just under 240 pounds. He ran in the 4.5s in his 40-yard dash. It was under 7 seconds in the 3-cone. You see that athleticism on film with his sideline to sideline range. He shows burst and pursuit, holds up pretty well in zone coverage. And that'll be the key with him. As long as he can show that he can stay on the field and passing downs in the NFL, he's got a chance to be, a really quality player for a long time. And really, I think he projects as almost a 4-down player, because you don't need to take him off the field. Let him stay on the field on 3rd down. Let him stay on the field on 4th down on special teams. He's got a lot of special team snaps in his background. And that's something that, I know coaches, they want to get their hands on guys like this. So absolutely, I think 3rd round is certainly possible for him.
Yeah. And the next guy's his linebacker mate, Baron Browning. And Baron, to me, his first couple of years at Ohio State, a lot of people outside the program and the fan base and the media, all that, maybe don't realize, like, the linebacker room was a mess at Ohio State his first couple of years. Maybe not the best situation with the whole defensive staff and that position coach, Bill Davis. But since Al Washington came and Jeff Hafley controlled the defense a couple years ago, I thought Barron's taken some really nice steps the last couple of years to get closer to that player we thought he was going to be out of high school. And the first couple of years, it was almost like a looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane type of scenario. And then I think the last couple of years, you really saw him flash a bunch, but there was still a lack of consistency, in my opinion. But, just his measurables, the way he moves, the way he could rush off the edge, he could rush in the middle. I just think that I could easily see someone falling in love with him and maybe taking him late 2nd round, but I could also see him falling to 4th round and maybe even beyond that. So what are you hearing on Baron Browning?
I'd be very surprised if he does not go on day 2. I think somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd round, there's too much ability there. 6'3", 245 pounds. Some teams look at him as like a designated pass rusher. Other teams look at him as more of the prototypical Sam. And it just goes to his ability and how much he can do. Ran the 4.55 in his 40-yard dash. 6.78 3-cone is outstanding for a 245 pounder. So there's just, and he's got long arms, 33.5-inch arms. Great looking athlete, moves with that athleticism that you want. Can hold up in coverage, just throw on the Penn State tape and watch him cover Pat Fryermuth. He's a physical tackler. There's a lot of things you could do with him. It's just you have to gauge, okay, where is he mentally, and does he have the instincts necessary where he's going to be able to play our scheme and be able to on one play put his hand on the ground and rush the passer, and on the next he's dropping into coverage and understanding, okay, well the offense is showing this, and so I need to do this, and that's what teams are working through with Baron Browning. Just where is he in his mental development? And so that'll probably eventually dictate where he's ultimately drafted and what type of NFL career he's going to have. But so physically impressive. And we know in the NFL, those guys don't last very long when, height, weight, speed, and that type of ability. Only 9 starts in his career. It's kind of you wished for more. But it wouldn't be surprising at all. This is the type of player that, some of these guys end up being better pros than college players.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you didn't say that last line, I could see him being a better pro than a college player. He might fit the game a little bit better and just learn a little bit more, being thrown into, certain roles and situations. And the last guy, I'm going to give you a lot of credit because I think before this past season, myself and a lot of other people are like, Shaun Wade's, going to be a first round pick. And I remember came on my podcast and you're like, I have him as an early second round guy. He could go late first, but you really wanted to see what he did this past season on the outside and not playing that slot nickel position for Ohio State. And obviously it wasn't the best of year. I think he probably gets a harder time from Ohio State fans and some critics who don't really watch the film and understand some of the things that Ohio State did on defense this year, which at times were a little bit puzzling, not going to lie about that. But, Shaun did not, let's call a spade a spade. He didn't do himself any favors probably by coming back this year, which you have to respect, his desire to help his team and try to win a championship. But at the same time, if he opted out, he'd probably be in a much different position than he is right now today. So I know he had a good workout the other day at Ohio State's second pro day. He ran a 4.4 340. He measured very well, but where do you see Shaun Wade? Is he a second round guy? Is he a third round guy? Could he fall further than that? How bleak are things, or maybe are things picking back up for him as far as his draft stock?
He's really an enigma because there's some rough tape on Shaun Wade out there, and you have to try to factor in, okay, how much was the injury affecting him this year? So a lot of times it looked like he was just coasting out there. And okay, was that because of the injury? Is that because, he was just kind of mailed it in at that point? I mean, this is the kind of type of questions that NFL teams are asking themselves as they try to figure out Shaun Wade. Outside corner did not, and I was excited for Shaun Wade this year. I thought, he's a big guy. He's 6'1", 192 pounds. I think his skill set would, do very well outside. It's not how it went. He did not look very comfortable. And so, okay, is he an inside corner only? Is he a safety? He's a pretty good tackler, but he really struggled to cover this past year. And it's really tough to figure out, okay, at what point in the draft do you feel comfortable rolling the dice on a guy like this who has ability? There's no question about that. It's just, in terms of his coverage, in terms of where you line him up, in terms of his confidence, where is he, and where do you take that chance? Actually, just today, got from an NFL team, he sent me what they had for him for the quote unquote official results from the pro day. They have a 4.46, which is pretty good time. 1.53 and a 10, which is a good time for him. 37.5-inch vert, 10.3 broad. He did not do the shuttle, did not do the 3-cone. Did not do the bench press. And those are the numbers you wish you had for him. I'm sure, just coming back from the injury, he probably just didn't have enough time to train for those events. And so you wish you had those data points with a player like this that you're trying to figure out, and every little bit helps. But we don't. And so Shaun Wade's going to be an interesting play. I don't see him going second round. I think somewhere between rounds 3 and 5 is where he's going to end up. Third round, fourth round, fifth round. I would not be surprised at all if he went in any of those 3 rounds.
Yeah, he's really interesting. And I thought you brought up something that I've been saying for a little bit, especially after watching him play this year. I think he's a safety. I think he could be a really good safety in the NFL. And the position he played for Ohio State, I guess it would have been his redshirt sophomore year, whatever we want to call it, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much like a safety position in the NFL, kind of like a cover safety position, that right. Slot, that nickel, and or third corner, whatever you want to call it, at Ohio State. And I think very similar to the way Malcolm Jenkins was a good cornerback at Ohio State, but then transitioned to an NFL safety. I'm not saying he's going to be Malcolm Jenkins, who's had a really nice career, but I think, with his size, with his tackling ability, and with just how he excelled and seemed much more confident in that position versus what he played this year, I just think safety could be a really interesting spot for him. So he'll have to learn and maybe take a year or two to really learn how to play that position in the NFL. But I just think that could end up where he or be where he ends up playing for a team down the line. So that's just my take on it.
He struggled a lot this year. There's no question about it. And so he's going to fall. But at a certain point in the draft, he's going to be a good value. He's going to be, okay, this is where we feel comfortable taking a chance, because how many 4th and 5th round picks don't pan out, and so take a chance on a guy with athleticism with, I think he showed plenty of resiliency this year to play through that injury, to battle back from mistakes. You roll the dice on a guy like that when you get to a certain point in the draft. So I think that, the value will be there for certain teams with what they value at that point, 4th round, 5th round. If you were to fall that far. So he's going to be a really tough guy to project and a really interesting player to watch on draft weekend.
Absolutely. Well, Dane, we'll let you get back to it. Thanks for joining us today. For everyone out there on Twitter, you could give him a follow at DP Brugler. That's DPBRUGLER. And if you are a subscriber to The Athletic or you want to check it out, I know they always have some good promos to join. He put out a incredible NFL draft guide. So if you're listening to this before the draft, I think what I'm looking at it right now, 636 prospects, 415 scouting reports. My head hurts just thinking about all the work you put into that. But congratulations on another great draft cycle. You're almost there, and we'll be looking forward to seeing how all your analysis panned out, as well as looking forward to your coverage for next year's prospects.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about, how these players fit with their new teams and not just, projections, but I appreciate the kind words and let's do this again. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Dane.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/T Pennington.